All right, thanks very much. So I don't see any online questions yet. Send those in. I know you're still live streaming. So let's go to questions for the audience. Very prompt. One popped right up over there. And feel free to ask either of us questions.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. My question, actually it's more of an observation, which is that it does seem as though future policymakers use uncertainty when they look at poll results. A politician is acutely aware of the uncertainty in a poll result. And I would suggest that that could be an avenue for research in which you can look at a future politician's response to knowing the uncertainty in a poll result. Does it make him or her more or less likely to behave in a certain way?
Interesting question for a political scientist, yeah, I think, or any social scientist more broadly. I don't know of any research on that, but that would be kind of interesting.
So Steve from the webcast feed suggests error bars for the layman. How would you describe, is there a good way to describe scientific uncertainty in 50 words or less? But I want to get back to the error bars idea. So that fan chart, that was great. And you know, I think the one group of scientists that is doing a really nice job with uncertainty is the meteorologists. So that tweet was fantastic. I remember when we had a story about it at the Post and it went viral and everybody read it, and it was so human, even though it was coming from the meteorological service. Anyhow, and I think the best depictions of uncertainty are graphic depictions of uncertainty, including error bars, and the cone of uncertainty. It's literally called the cone of uncertainty for hurricanes. If we could just in all of our communications, show cones of uncertainty somehow, whenever it's relevant to describe your data, in journalism, we should do more charts, I know, at the Post. So I think error bars for the layman is a suggestion from Steve. Do you have 50 words or less to describe uncertainty?
Yeah, my 50 words or less is to read Baruch Fischoff's work, because I am not an expert on graphical presentation, but Baruch and other people are, and I think a lot has been learned about good graphical presentation. Yeah.
All right, we'll take some more from the floor. Yeah, one in the back, please. Thank you.
Hi, Raquel Holmes, Improv Science. My question is, could you say something about the expression of uncertainty with trustworthiness? So I know I'm drawing back to the previous panel, but I appreciated your final comment in the question of certitude to disregard. And so it's somewhat related to the previous question of what about us speaking to our uncertainty and how that impacts our audience in terms of being trustworthy?
You know, there seem to be, I don't know what hard research there is, but there seem to be two competing opinions. My own gut feeling is that to have trust, that it's best to be transparent. Express the uncertainty, say what because if you want someone to believe what you do know, then you have to be upfront about what you don't know. That's what seems to me sensible, but again, I'm an economist, and so I may not think like other people. And it does seem that lots of people say it's the opposite, that once you express uncertainty, then you open yourself up to getting attacked from this side or another. And so what you need to do to deal with the public is to make believe that you know all these things. And that's why we have this incredible certitude, is that people think they've got to, just be the expert on everything. I find that very distressing. That may be psychologically correct today. To be optimistic at all, I prefer to think of this is that if that is a problem in American society, and it clearly is, I think, that it's not innate in the human brain structure, but it's rather a cultural norm, and that could be changed. So I think the cultural norm could be changed so that if someone gets up there and says, I know exactly what's going to happen, that instead of people saying, oh, this person's an expert, they say, wait a minute. If they say they know what happened without expressing uncertainty, then you should worry about that. And then we just flip the standard so that expression of uncertainty should be the standard. I think that will take a lot of time, but to remain optimistic at all, I would hope that that's possible to do.
Yeah, and in the media, so I'm an editor, I don't write myself if I can help it. I have reporters for that. And what I try to do is help people express themselves better. And one of the most common edits I make is to ask, wait, how do you know this as the reporter? How do the scientists know this? And if the answer is, well, we don't know yet, just put in a line, scientists aren't sure why X, but, and move on. And it's very disarming and it's very honest. And then it allows your reader to have the cognitive load, put on some other more interesting part of the story. So it's sort of a way of displaying that we're being super straight with you about what's new, what we know, what isn't known. Let's see another question from the floor. Anybody? There's one over there. Thank you.
Yes, so Sabin Marka from Columbia University. So it is as easy to overestimate error bars as underestimate them, and they also evolve in time. So, for example, in the hurricane case, it was very hard to predict what's going to happen, but I bet if people are thinking, they could have said something. So it takes time. So how do you deal with evolving error bars?
Well, they should evolve, of course, because as information accumulates, then hopefully, then your uncertainty will change. Typically, you think as information accumulates, you become more certain. Sometimes it can go in the opposite direction, and you temporarily become more uncertain. I might mention, I'll just give you a plug, if I think the study director is somewhere here in the audience. I was just finished a term as a member of a National Academies Committee on the use of social sciences in the weather enterprise. And the kinds of questions that came up before our committee, whose report was released just a month ago, were precisely questions about how to communicate better in weather forecasting, particularly in hurricane-type situations, and how to do that kind of updating. So you should be able to find that report online at National Academy Press and see what it has to say.
And getting that right is literally a matter of life and death, life or death. So I have a question from online about the CBO. So just a show of hands, how many people never paid attention to a CBO report until this year? Anybody else? Yeah.
How many people still don't pay attention?
Well, so the question, can the CBO continue to function effectively, this is from the projection booth, can it continue to function effectively in the public domain as a reality test for policy initiatives and be transparent about uncertainty?
Well, I think it should be able to. On the other hand, CBO staff feel that they can't. So again, I've had discussions with 2 former directors of the CBO, and they're very bright people, and they know all about this, but they're the kinds of people who have said to me that, our client is Congress. The CBO is a analytical arm of Congress, and Congress just doesn't want to hear about uncertainty. And I've had it said to me that if the CBO were to express uncertainty, that Congress would get upset and would reduce CBO funding or things like that. So these are pretty serious questions. I don't want to downplay them at all. But if to think that this is a box that we're in that is just impossible to get out of, that would just be horribly pessimistic. And it's easy for me as an academic to come in, and say the CBO should be more transparent. I'd like to try to give them ammunition so that eventually they can change things.
Another question? One right here, thanks.
Hi, Bill Dennison from the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. For 8 years, I was working with Governor Martin O'Malley on Chesapeake Bay issues, and he's a very data-savvy, he's the most data-savvy politician I've ever met. He statted everything from when he was the mayor and then governor, and he told us at the beginning of our relationship, there are 2 words you scientists can't use. It depends. Because those 2 words I can't manage. I can't use those. If you preface it with "it depends," I can't use that to manage. So here's a data-savvy politician who gets uncertainty but can't manage in a political realm with that uncertainty. So how do you address that issue?
I left open questions, as you saw in my second last slide. And as an economist, I don't feel, in terms of my own research background, the one who's most equipped to do that. But I think this kind of question, I mean, it's vital to try to get underneath this. You know, the earlier version of this from economics was before Lyndon Johnson, was that about Harry Truman, who is supposed to have said that he wants to have a one-armed economist because the economist would say, well, on the one hand or the other hand, and Harry Truman just didn't want that. So that, at least among economists, that goes around as a joke, okay? But you know, if someone like O'Malley, who's a very bright guy, when I was writing my book, my 2013 book, I try to keep as my, it's like try to have a personalized target audience when you write a book, and I try to keep in mind Barack Obama. And I never got to, unfortunately, I never got to speak with President Obama about this. I'd like to think that O'Malley could handle it, that certainly President Obama can, and that some subset of serious politicians can, or can be helped along in that direction. But what's going on, and so why it's so difficult for someone like O'Malley to deal with this, I think that is part of the kind of basic open question, both for the politicians and for the public. Yeah.
Other question from the floor? I think just for the case of the live stream, unless you guys have a live one up there.
Yeah, sorry.
You have the live one? Thank you.
Karen Florini from Climate Central. Virtually any business leader will tell you they are making decisions in the face of uncertainty. Virtually any military leader will tell you that they are making decisions in the face of uncertainty. Virtually any scientist will tell you that their research includes uncertainties. So where is this notion of an absolute demand for certainty coming from, given that virtually every decision that we're making in every realm of human endeavor is entrenched in uncertainty? And my real question is there a role, a responsibility for the media to remind all readers in all contexts that yes, there is uncertainty here, but that exists throughout all realms of human endeavor, particularly if you can push toward the quantification of it?
Oh, absolutely. And we try to do that. People tend to not tweet or remember the caveats section. The Washington Post, our media columnist, Margaret Sullivan, had a really nice interview with Nate Silver of 538 saying, polls, why should we ever trust them again? And Nate, bless his heart, got a little defensive and said, well, we had all the caveats. You people just didn't read it right. So, like I said, we do try, but we should do more. I totally agree. So there was one more question that got cut off because she didn't have a mic yet.
Hi, thanks. I'm wondering if there are other cultures, countries, groups of people who do better with this, because it seems to me that there are a lot of factors that perhaps a political scientist or a sociologist could comment on, but I'm wondering if you have engaged in that, what you can comment?
Yeah, okay, so this is just personal experience, but I spent a lot of time in Europe, particularly in Great Britain and London, and I think, the example I gave was from the Bank of England. I think in general, the Brits have an easier time with this. I've given public lectures there, and I don't get the same, Congress can't deal with this. They say Parliament will deal with it. In addition to the Bank of England case, there's also on any legislation that's coming before Parliament, the ministry is supposed to do what's called an impact analysis, which is like a cost-benefit analysis. And the written requirements are to do a best-case and worst-case scenario. And we don't have something similar. And you think the British culture would be close to ours. But I typically find in Great Britain and also on the continent a lot more sophistication about this than in our country, unfortunately.
So we are over time, unfortunately, but thanks everybody for the great questions.